Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, he must take up his cross, deny himself, and follow me. I think for so long, when I've heard that, I immediately translate in my head to come after Jesus means the same as to follow him. But as I listened to this again, he just told Peter, Satan, get behind me. And Satan is not following Jesus. What does Jesus mean when he says, if anyone wants to come after me? I think he may be speaking about that in terms of succession. Who's going to come after me when I am no longer here? Who's going to stand in my place? Who's going to be the Christ figure when I am no longer here visible? If you are going to come after me, if you are going to be the one who stands in my place. And certainly last week we just heard what conversation took place before this. Peter confessed his faith, and Jesus bestowed upon him the office of the Petrine ministry, that is, to be the first pope of the church. You will come after me as my vicar, the vicar of Christ. But I think Jesus says that to all of us to some degree, because every one of us who have been baptized are baptized into Christ to be part of Christ, that we stand then as Christian. And the word Christian means another Christ or a little Christ, that we are the successors. We are the ones who stand in the place of Jesus Christ. And if you want to be my successor, if you want to stand in my place, then you have to take up your cross and deny yourself. You have to do what I did. And Peter hears this and has an immediate reaction against it. He was just told they were going to Jerusalem, or they're just told that they're going to Jerusalem. And you've got to think that Peter in his mind said, but wait a minute, I just said you are the Son of God. The Son of God doesn't go to be denied. The Son of God doesn't go to be executed. That's not what the Son of God is. That's not what the Messiah is. Lord, have you read your scriptures? And Jesus rebukes him back. Peter, get behind me. You are no longer thinking as God does, but you're thinking as a human being does. Well, what is Peter thinking? Peter thinks that the world will be friendly to God. Peter thinks that the world is going to accept the gospel. Peter thinks that Jesus will win them over and will be crowned king instead. And I think that's a message that sometimes sits in our own hearts. That's the temptation in our lives. The temptation that says, I can be Christian and I can be in the world. I can have both. I can have it both ways. I can be fully immersed in everything this world offers, and I can be Christian at the same time, because surely they're not opposed. But the great Catholic tradition of the ages that goes back to the very beginning reminds us that the world will always be against Christ. That the world will not accept him. That the world not only rejected him in his own time and crucified him then, but the world continues to reject him and continues to crucify him. And so we have seen the blood of martyrs poured out over the centuries. This is nothing new. And yet, how many Christians have been told, if you believe in God, if you live the Christian life, if you are faithful, you will enjoy prosperity, you will enjoy blessing, you will enjoy success, because God will protect you. That is a lie. That prosperity gospel is a temptation. It is the temptation of Satan, that we can have our cake and eat it too, that we can live fully in the world and fully in Jesus Christ. But Jesus established that church just last week because he was calling his disciples out of the world. You are not going to live in the world. I am calling you into a different kingdom. I'm calling you to something else. I'm calling you out of this place that is going to reject me, that is going to crucify me, and oh, by the way, you too. And that strikes Peter's ears wrongly. In fact, everyone, I think, who has ever followed God has had that same experience. Go back many hundreds of years before to the prophet Jeremiah. You duped me, O Lord, and I let myself be duped. Here I thought that being your prophet was going to be a good thing, that you were going to preserve me, protect me, but everyone is against me. What the heck, God? I let myself fall for your promise, and then you gave me this? He's angry, and he's speaking strong words to God, because that's not what he expected in being a follower. It's not what Peter expected in being a disciple. And Jesus reminds his disciples today that if you are going to come after me, then you have to do what I do. You will have to take up your cross, deny yourself, be rejected by the world, and live something completely different. And it's hard. It's hard to do that because the world around us in which we live, in many ways, it's like our fish tank. We are so surrounded by it. It so permeates us. It so is breathed in and breathed out of us that if we're not careful, we are transformed by it. We are transformed by a world who says, there is no God. There is no Lord's Day. There is no holiness in that. And so time is totally yours. Do with it as you please. It gets into our heads. And that may not, it's like, oh, if someone said that to me, I would easily reject that. Until I go on vacation and I don't really feel like going to church. I don't feel like finding Mass. Kids have a sporting event, and I want them to get to the tournaments. We can't miss that, so we might have to step away from the altar. And it's okay because everyone else is doing it. It's the culture in which I live. I don't want to buck that. I don't want to go against that. I don't want to challenge my friends or my neighbors or take this thing away from my child. I'll take eternal life away, but I won't take a ball away. This is how the world gets into our minds and begins to change us. It changes our ideas of human sexuality and procreation. It changes our ideas of what is real and what is not, masculinity and femininity. It changes our minds on how we take care of the world in which we live and being good stewards of the earth. It changes our minds to all of these things. And if we're not careful, we are drawn in. Which is why St. Paul, all the way back in the first century, writes to those Christians and says, do not let your minds be changed by the world around you. You cannot be transformed by the world. You must be transformed by Christ. You have put him on. Now live that in the midst of this world. So much so that St. Paul says, let your body become a sacrifice. You see, to be Christian means to suffer. It's necessary. We're going to have to suffer. We're going to have to die to self. We're going to have to encounter the cross. And I think the greatest saints among us today are the ones who are suffering greatly because they are drawn to the cross. I remember the words of Mother Teresa to a woman who was dying and in much pain. And Mother Teresa said to her, how blessed you are that Jesus has drawn you to himself on the cross and is embracing you and kissing you right there. That's what it feels like to be blessed by God. To be blessed by God is to feel the pain of the world, because the world will kill you. The world already kills you. Your body gets old. It gets sick. It gets weak. It dies. It wants to wear us down, and it wears our morals down as well as our physical body. The world will crucify us. And the more we experience that crucifixion, the more we experience God's blessing. And this is testimony of the saints throughout the ages, that when you look at the holiness of the saints, you see how they suffered and how life was difficult and the pain that they went through. And those who didn't, they voluntarily took it on. They took on penance. They took on extreme acts of charity because they knew in order to stand in the place of Christ, they had to lift high the cross. I need to make the cross visible in my life. And if it doesn't come naturally so, then I have to choose it. When you were baptized and when you were confirmed, the oil was smeared upon your head in the sign of the cross. You bear the cross on your foreheads, and we must bear it in our lives and show to everyone, I'm not afraid of suffering. I'm not afraid of pain. I'm not afraid of death because it has conquered. And that's the good news in all of this. Jesus does not give a message that ends in suffering. He gives us a message that ends in the resurrection. But in order to get to the resurrection, we go first through the cross. And so as the world crucifies us, and as we experience the pain and suffering of life, we are not beat down. Our hope is that the cross conquers. I will never perhaps convert a single mind by the words I say, but someone on their deathbed, someone who is suffering greatly, offering that pain with Jesus on the cross will convert hearts left and right. The greatest power is not found on a throne. It is found on a hospital bed. This is where the cross is, and this is how the world is conquered. So as you and I want to follow after Jesus, we are not ashamed or afraid to take up our cross, because the cross has already conquered the world.